Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome back to Intersections, where our aspiration is to have us understand what our fullest potential can be, both in life and in leadership, by creating intersections. Intersections, as in a fusion of inner and outer, of profit and purpose, of east and west, of science and spirituality, but also intersections as in bringing fresh voices, bringing thought leaders and practitioners and people who are leading storied and remarkable lives onto this camera in this community so that your path and my path can intersect with their path for a moment, and we can listen to them and tune into them and gain inspiration from them. And then they go on and we go on, and hopefully we've all been inspired in some powerful way. So today, it is a great pleasure for me to have with us Candace Lightner. I'm going to be introducing her, and then we're going to start the conversation with her just in a couple of minutes. In the meanwhile, let's use the chat window to get to say hello, share with us again where you're tuning in from and calling in from, and share this webcast in your social media community so that others in your community can also benefit and join if you feel that that's worth it. All right, so as you're doing that, as you're saying the hellos, let me just kind of like close out one follow-up that I want to do from last time. I had on this Intersections webcast last time with us the great pleasure of having Melanie Joy, who gave us some really powerful thoughts and ideas around relationships. Many of you have written to me even after the webcast to talk about how thankful you were and how inspired you were about the provocative and thoughtful ideas that she was offering about how to nurture relationships, especially at a time like this. Closer to the second half of the conversation, we zoomed out and we went from purely a frame which had to do with human to human to do with human to nature, to human to other life forms. And in that part of the conversation, veganism came up as a practice that Melanie personally favors and has committed her life to. And that raised a question for some of you, I know, because, for instance, one of you wrote to me and said, one question that I was left wondering was, how deeply is compassion, as a quality, connected with, carnism, with like the idea of whether you eat meat or you don't? If one is not a vegetarian, does he or she not be as compassionate as somebody who is a vegetarian? So that was a question that, a few of you, I think, had in your mind after that conversation. I realized we weren't able to do full justice to it right there. And here is at least the position I would take on that matter, just as a way to give us some mathematical construct, to think about that question, which is, I think ultimately the intent of this show is to give us an opportunity to go within to ask hard questions of our own self and find truth coming from our own inner light. And so to that end, how can we claim that, someone who's let's say choosing to not eat meat is more compassionate than someone who's eating meat, if in fact there are other aspects of compassion in how you treat your fellow human beings, in how you are with yourself, etc., where perhaps someone who's eating meat might be, that particular individual might be, extremely remarkable. And I know some incredibly remarkable people like that who have chosen to go down that path, etc., right? And so I feel like these questions are so rich and nuanced that to overly simplify and to make any kind of, quick little black and white kind of judgments on the basis of just like one issue, which is around your dietary choices, would be too limiting a frame. But then ultimately the purpose of this show, this webcast, is to get each of us sparked in a certain way, to get each of us to be opened up, to certain ideas and thoughts and possibilities. And if we have time, I might share with you my own journey with regard to my relationship with the world beyond humanity, the universe, the planet, and all living forms. But that's a different conversation. For now, what I want to offer to you is that with regard to the logic and value of that part of the conversation that we had with Melanie Joy, I might encourage you to just see it as a mind-opening kind of like just like question to ask yourself, which is the following, that when we think about relationships, when we think about opening our heart, when we think about the quality of compassion, do we only want to limit that conversation to something that relates to human? Or is it possible that it also relates to human to animals, from human to the planet, from human to the universe. And here is a little thesis that I'm just going to read to you from an article that one of my colleagues sent me that I found very profound and beautiful in this regard. I'm actually going to give you a link to that article so that you can also, if you're interested, enjoy it in your own leisure time. So let me just put that here in the chat window. All right. And so here's just a couple of thoughts from that article. Many historical movements in the world have three key words that express their spirit. For example, in the American Declaration of Independence, they were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The implication is that it's human life, human equality, and human happiness. But what about the idea that we as humanity are also dependent? We are dependent on nature. We are dependent on other communities. We are a member of one earth community. And maybe what we need is a certain different trinity, a certain different three-part set of things to look at. One is our own spirit, our own soul. The other is the soil, which is the planet, the extended community beyond just the human race. After all, we're dependent on the planet for food, for oxygen, for other things. And the third is society as our extended self. So he calls it soul, soil, and society. I'm going to leave it up to you to take that in your own kind of path and in your own time. But I just want to kind of offer that up as a closing remark, which is the purpose of Intersections, to spark thoughts and ideas, but ultimately to seek to take us within so that we can, from our own personal intuition and guidance from within, make the right choices and calls and keep evolving our notion of self. On that note, it gives me a great pleasure to be introducing Candace Lightner to you today. And rather than do it in my words, I'm going to just show you a video through which to bring her to life. In this video, among other things, you will see her be presenting to my students at Columbia Business School as well, because she has been a path-breaking force in society. And I can't think in some ways of a better person than Candace for us to have in our midst when we aspire and we hope to find the path forward on how to evolve society, on how to forge meaning, on how to have a meaningful impact in all we take on in life and leadership. So let me just share this video with you in the next minute or two, and then we will invite Candace to join us right here.
And my daughter's death, that somebody can drink and drive and still have a valid California driver's license in this country and get away with murder.
Became what is known as a grassroots activist. Grassroots means working outside the system to change the inequities within, and activist means getting the job done.
People look at driving as a right and not as a privilege. We want to change that attitude. We want to separate the two. You want to drink? That's fine. If you have a drinking problem, it's your problem. You get behind the wheel of a car and it becomes my problem.
You kick a few pebbles, turn a few stones, and eventually you have an avalanche.
I always like to get something positive out of something negative. I've always been like that. Society needs activists on all levels who have not forgotten how good right can feel and the self-fulfilling importance of making a difference.
I was instrumental in passing over 750 laws in 5.5 years. I could not have done that if I hadn't learned how to compromise. Did I always get what I wanted? I did not. But did the laws make a difference? They did. Deal with the issue on the local, state, and national level, because it's a local, state, and national problem.
All right. Without further ado, let us welcome into our midst Candace Lightner.
Hi, nice to
Candace,
be here.
warm welcome, warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. I've had, such a rewarding experience having you in our classroom at Columbia that I've often felt so drawn to the idea of also finding a way to connect you with the broader community of people that we've had a chance to, be engaging in our work. And so, it just gives me a very special, joy today, knowing that we are making that happen right here. And in fact, one of the, comments from one of our participants today, Angela, I'm just kind of putting it up here on the screen for you to read as well, because, there are many people here whose life you have tangibly impacted, right? So she's talking about when she was a sophomore in high school in the late 90s, I attended the Mothers Against Drunk Driving National Youth Summit in Washington, D.C. I lived in California at that time, so she's feeling, I'm sure, a great sense of joy and, connecting with you as well. Candace, maybe we can just start by helping our audience understand where this journey began for you. And I'm going back to May 3rd, 1980. It's a day that, we recently had the anniversary of. And, I know it's not easy for you to go back, with the flood of memories that you have, from that day. But if you could just, help our audience just understand what triggered this path that you've taken ever since with what happened that day, I think that would be a great gift to them.
Sure. So on May 3rd, my daughter, 13-year-old daughter, Carrie, was walking to a Catholic school carnival, which was just down the street from where we lived. She and her friend were walking inside the bicycle lane. She was hit from behind. She was thrown 125 feet. She was left in the road to die. And it was a hit and run. And they didn't catch the man until several days later. At the time that they did, I learned that he was out on bail from another hit and run drunk driving crime, that he had had a number of other prior drunk driving arrests and convictions, and yet he was still driving on a valid California driver's license. And I know a lot of people think that I should have been very angry at him, and obviously I was. But as I learned more about her death and the reasons behind drunk driving and what was going on in the country at that time, which is hard for people to realize who weren't alive back then, but it was basically socially acceptable, I became really more angry with the system than I did with him, to be honest with you. I was just really angry at a system that I believed enabled him to continue to drink and drive.
Candace, there's a quote about yours that I read where you talk about how, you promised yourself on the day of your daughter's death that you would fight to make this needless homicide count for something positive in the years ahead. And that quote is so heroic, so so remarkable in the fusion it shows of a certain level of deep anger and pain you were feeling, and yet the capacity for you to rise above it and to feel like something positive has to come out from it. Could you talk about that a little bit? Like where did that spring from, and what exactly was that thought or idea that came to you that day?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Hitendra, I would say rise above it in thinking about it, because it's really hard to rise above the kind of pain that I was feeling then. I think in my case, what happened is the anger was so prevalent and so prominent, and the rage, and I was incredibly angry and outraged that we were allowing people to do something that was killing 25,000 people a year at that time, and that comedians made jokes about it, and everybody identified with the drunk driver and nobody identified with the victim. That this was just such a prevalent thing that nobody thought twice about. And I think it was that the anger took over, and the anger was so great that I felt strongly I had to find a solution. I'm very solution oriented. No matter what the tragedy is in my life or no matter what the conflict is, I always want to find a solution. And I felt equally the same in this case. And in fact, I just did a blog about death for the COVID sufferers. And I mentioned that in her case, my solution really was initially to donate her organs so that someone could live or be well again. And then I found out that I couldn't because her body was so badly mutilated that I couldn't do that. And I don't think I've ever felt more helpless in my life and more lost. And I kept thinking, what good can I get out of this child's death? She was my baby. She was an identical twin. She was my oldest. And hence the solution was make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. And that started my journey.
Yeah, wow. Along the way, you faced many unpleasant surprises, isn't it? I noticed at one point you have shared with me and with the class about how what you found is that there was a pervasive violation of this ethic of not driving drunk across different parts of society. So you weren't really getting the empathy or the support from people. Can you talk about what that was like when you kind of like started to go on this quest to help other parents and help other mothers not lose their children, and what you discovered in the world?
Well, let me tell you something. One of the things I learned is it's tough when you feel like you've got right on your side, which I did, and other people don't agree. And I mean, the people that didn't agree were the people in power, basically. I had a legislator throw me out of his office. I had another one tell me if I didn't like the way this country operates, to leave it, and basically, move me out the door. I mean, I had a judge say to me one time, if you don't like the laws in this country, little lady, change it. So I did. But I mean, it wasn't like I was embraced by the politicians and the leaders that I needed to influence in order to pass the legislation or change the policies that needed to be changed that, in fact, would protect society from drunken drug drivers. So that was probably my biggest challenge, was how to win them over.
Yeah. There's a question being asked about the role of sort of anger in all of this. So, is anger something that kind of can be a crippling force and a blinding force, or is anger actually something that can be also a force for positive transformation? I mean, what was your relationship with that anger that initially was so, weighing heavy on you?
Mm-hmm. So it's hard to go back 40 years because I don't have that same anger now, although I can still get angry. And I can still get passionate about injustice, about different kinds of injustice, angry that they exist, angry that no one has done something about it, angry that my child died as a result because no one else had done something about it. So in my case, that anger, and I've often said this, MAD wasn't helpful with my grief, but it was very helpful with me in dealing with my anger. Because every time we accomplished something, or a bill was passed, or more people would join me, or I was able to help more victims and survivors, the anger would diminish more and more because I saw it doing so many good things. It was just doing so many good things. We were changing attitudes. People weren't drinking and driving anymore. We were saving lives. In the first 3 years, deaths were reduced by about 20%. I mean, we were seeing results that I never even imagined. And so when you see the good that anger, in my case, did, it kind of makes it worthwhile. And then you eventually, the anger sort of goes away and it's replaced with more thought processes and, more strategic thinking, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Did you think that when you embarked on this, that this would be the size and scale and enduring impact that you would achieve, or even aspire to achieve? What were you thinking in those initial steps?
Yeah, I wasn't. I remember I went back to NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and I was researching. We didn't have computers and internet and Google and all that stuff in those days, so you did it in a much different way. And I went back and I was meeting with some of the people that worked there, some of the, doctors and people that worked on this issue for years. And I remember one of them said, if you make a dent in 10 years, I'll eat my hat, which I did give him 3 years later to eat. And I just didn't, I didn't really stop and think, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to make this kind of a difference. I wasn't motivated by that so much as I was motivated by raw emotion. And by making sure, really, I had such a need to protect my remaining children. For those of you who don't know, this was the second time my family had been impacted by a drunk driver. The first time, both twins were injured when they were babies, not hospitalized, but injured. And I just had this tremendous need to protect them from having this happen again, and to protect other people as well. So I didn't really sit down and think, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. I sat down and I thought, I just want to make sure that people don't think the same way about this as they do now. I wanted to change attitudes. That's really what I wanted to do, was to change attitudes and make drunk driving socially unacceptable.
Yes, thank you. How did you end up feeling the confidence that you can actually take this cause on? Because tell us a little bit about sort of your background in terms of your qualifications, so to say, or if there was no LinkedIn that time, but if there was a LinkedIn, what would the profile have said? Why were you going to be the right person to take on this mantle for the world?
I think that was crazy. I was so incredibly naive, which really worked in my favor. By the way, I wasn't a registered voter. I honestly didn't know the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. I had to go out and register to vote before I actually met with my first legislator, because I was told to do that by someone. So I did, and I became an other, and I'm still an other. I was a real estate agent and the mother of 3, a single parent. And I didn't have any really major formal education. I simply was this mother who really felt strongly about an issue. And my education, I got, it was a day-by-day education. I learned day by day. I made mistakes, I learned not to repeat them. It was really a learning experience. And I think today, if I had it to do all over again, I probably wouldn't, to be honest with you. But it was the naivete. In fact, someone once called me Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington. And I will tell you that it truly worked in my favor. I didn't think I knew it all. I was willing to listen. I absorbed knowledge. I listened to both sides, by the way. I remember when I first started and I was learning how to deal with legislation and what lobbying was all about. And thank you to the California Highway Patrol, by the way, because they were the ones who really helped me there. And I wanted to have a meeting of both sides, the people that I thought would be opposed to what I wanted to do and the people I thought would be supportive. And I was told by a number of people, oh, you can't do that. That's not how it works. You don't do that. Well, I did, because I didn't know any better. And so I sat down with both sides and said, okay, what will you agree to here? What won't you agree to? What will you do? What will you won't do? What will you support? What won't you support? And it was an incredible learning experience for me. And it helped me in terms of moving forward and designing and developing what strategy I used.
Candace, I want to invite you to share some more with us about the journey. Share some stories. I remember you talking about how how much of a struggle you had in trying to get into the California governor's office, right? So can you share a little bit about that? That journey towards actually let's not even say whether you were successful or not, but what was that about?
So the first strategy, we had a strategy deal with a problem at the local, state, and national level. And so at the state level, I decided to call on Governor Brown, who was the governor at that time, to form a commission, a task force to solve. It was always to solve, never to study, but to solve the problem of drunk driving. And so we started a petition drive, and that was my first press conference, was to announce the founding of MAD and to announce a petition drive. I always believe you should be for things. I know Mothers Against Drunk Driving is against, but I always was for something, for commissions, support, for bills, for this, for that, whatever. So we did this petition, and I tried to get in, tried to make an appointment, and I was refused. And I tried on numerous occasions, and I kept getting refused. And I would even go into his office, and I'd carry balloons in, and I'd take Cokes in for the staff, and I would just sit there all day and hope that he would come by and maybe notice me and decide he was finally going to see me. I had some people working behind the scenes, and that were also trying to get me in. And I was absolutely not successful. I was not able to get in to see him. And then we decided to call on the president at that time, who was Carter, to form a presidential commission to solve the drunk driving problem. And I went back to Washington, D.C., and Cindy Lamb, God love her, whose daughter was the youngest quadriplegic, I think, in the world at the time because of a drunk driver, joined with me. She was out of Maryland. She started her own group, her own organization after Laura was injured. And Laura did eventually die at the age of 7 from her injuries. She and I joined forces, and I have to tell you my picketing story. So, we had picketed in Sacramento. The kids had, Carrie and Serena's friends had picketed. We decided kind of on the spur of the moment that we would picket the White House in DC. And, we'd never set up anything like this. I don't think we had any permits, but we thought it would be a good idea. And at that time it was Cindy and me basically. And so every TV show or radio show we did, we mentioned that we were going to march on the White House, and that Cindy and I, by the way, were going to march on the White House. And so I forget, it was before we did the big press conference, or either that morning of or the day before. Cindy and I went out there, and Cindy had Laura with her in a stroller, and I had a placard with a picture of my daughter talking about drunk driving. And it started with I get really emotional when I talk about this, but it started with just Cindy and I. And I know people aren't going to be impressed when they hear the thousands and thousands of people now marching for whatever, but people came by and honked their horns. They pulled over, they joined us. I think it was maybe a little over 100 that it ended up being, but it was the fact that it was spur of the moment. People didn't know us. They didn't know who we were. They had either heard us on the radio or they saw our signs, and they decided to join us. It was such an impactful moment for me to realize that we were able to draw in 100 plus strangers into this cause, because in the beginning you tend to think, I don't know if other people have gone through this, but you tend to think it's your cause. And it's hard to realize it's really everybody's cause. And, but anyway, so we did the press conference, and I was actually warned by the governor's office that if I said, because everyone knew that I was going to be asked the question, has the governor agreed to see you, which he hadn't. And I was hoping he would agree before I went and did this press conference so I could say yes, but he didn't. And I was warned by one of his staff members that if I said anything negative about him at all, I would never see him. So the first question that was asked was by a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter. And it was the very first question. And he said to me, Mrs. Lightner, I understand you've been trying to see the governor. And I said, yes, I have. And he said, have you had any success? And at that time, we had something in California, I think they were called tsetse flies, that were harming the crops. And he was going up and down the state, trying to deal with the farmers and these flies. And my response was, no, because he's more concerned about tsetse flies than he is about dying children. And that was just the thing that to me, I believed, and I said it, and I thought, well, I guess I can kiss meeting him goodbye. And, but that's what I believe. And so when I got back, I actually had already had a meeting set up in his office with other people. And as it turned out, they called me back, and I was able to meet with him. And we had a wonderful conversation. I became a big fan of his during that time period.
Yeah, what a powerful story. Yeah, thank you. Let's do this. Let's turn to our audience. Candace, one quality that I so admire in you, which is shining through in the story already so far, is a sense of fearlessness with which you have approached life. The idea that you don't have to fear, in a sense, your own perceived limitations, the reactions of people, whether you will succeed or fail at the cause, whether people laugh at you or engage with you and support you when you're walking out and taking certain public steps and actions and all that. There just seems to be this, complete sort of just like free flowing of spirit and energy from you into the world beyond, based on what you think is right, to do in any given moment. And what I want to do is I want to turn to our audience and I want to ask them, what is the quality that you are seeing ringing true in Candace? Because I'm sure there's more than just this one. In the story that you heard so far, what has struck you most about the story so far, about what it invokes in us, about the possibilities in the human condition that Candace is so vividly illustrating in her lived experience? So I'd love to hear from as many of you about what you're taking away so far. And as you're doing that, I also want to remind you to, if you're interested, to share this on your social media channels. I'm also going to ask my colleague to share our social media links so that after this webcast is over, we can keep the conversation going there. I would certainly be delighted with questions, comments, thoughts that you want to offer on your social media platforms based on the links I'm providing as a common ground, common place, common community for us to come to, right? So as you're doing that, let me just turn to a couple of questions we're getting from the audience here. Roland is asking, okay, actually, let me just kind of acknowledge Angela's comment first. She's saying I love how you've turned anger into something productive. The fearlessness too. You seem unstoppable, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful comment. Roland is asking, what is the greatest learning that you have taken away that you could share with everyone from your journey?
So, well, in my talks, and I say this, as I mentioned before, I was incredibly naive. I wasn't a registered voter. I didn't have a college education. I struggled through 2 years with twin babies. And yet I was able to start a movement with no experience, no background, no education whatsoever, and I was able to succeed. And so it is my belief, based on my experience, that anyone really, because I have people say, yeah, but you must have done this, or you must have been. No, I didn't, I wasn't, and I hadn't. So I really firmly believe that anyone can make a difference. Anyone can have an impact. And it doesn't have to be a global impact. It doesn't have to be a national impact. It can be just a little impact at the local level. And, can be an impact within your home, within your community, within your workplace. And I know times have changed, but anyone can, if they really believe strongly in what they need to do. And they believe that it's the right way to move forward, even though some people will obviously, disagree with you. I just believe anyone can do this.
Candace, you talked about the depth of conviction, the depth of belief, and we're going to talk about that soon in the work that you're doing now to codify, what it takes to succeed at social reform, social activism. But this depth of conviction, of belief, did it ever get shaken in you? Did you ever, have a period where you were getting a little bit sort of maybe dissuaded or just disenchanted or just, just distracted, from this cause?
I did, but because of my grief. It wasn't because of things people said to me so much as it was because of the pain that I was going through. I remember, and most people didn't realize I was going through that kind of pain because I didn't believe in crying in public, at least for me, because I felt that it would take away from my message. So my crying was done in private. But I remember one time I was learning to speak. I'd never spoken in public before, by the way. I used to read poetry that I'd written, and my knees would knock so bad you could hear it against the podium in my real estate company. And so I was trying to learn how to speak. Oh, and I'll share with you a wonderful story. Well, first this story and then another wonderful story, by the way, about learning to speak for people who are nervous about that. And I had booked an engagement with some local neighborhood thing. And that morning I was so overwhelmed by pain. And the pain is, I can't explain it to you. It's like a ton has been just put on your heart. It just sits on your heart, like 2,000 pounds are sitting on your heart. And I literally could not get up. I could not get up. And I called the gentleman and I told him and I apologized and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it today. And he wasn't kind about it. He wasn't nice about it. And I didn't tell him why. I probably should have. I should have said, well, I'm feeling 2,000 pounds of rock on my chest, but I just said I can't make it. Anyway, when I was learning to speak, because I'd never done public speaking before, I was invited, somebody said, oh, go to Toast. I think it's called Toastmasters, and they'll help you, so go, put together a speech and go. And they do this little clock thing, the hourglass, and they turn it upside down and they write down all the things you do wrong. And afterwards, they'll critique you. And so I thought, okay, that I need to do that. So I went and I spoke, and the clock turned upside down. And I kept waiting for people to take notes and write down things, and nobody did. And, at the end of my presentation, I sat down and I looked around the room and they all sort of talked. And then they said to me, you did a number of things wrong. We're just going to be honest with you. You did a number of things wrong. Don't change a thing. And that, I have to tell you, was like, wow, I guess I can speak. I was like, okay, I guess then the lesson here is speaking from the heart. It doesn't matter if you don't say this right, or you're not, or your flow is off, or whatever the criteria is. It's the speaking from the heart that matters.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. We have a class I teach online on communicating with impact. And one of the core ideas that I've discovered through studying some of the great speakers and leaders, and which you evoke so beautifully in what you just said, is this notion of a complete fusion between you as a speaker and the message you're seeking to communicate and the audience that you're communicating it to. And that fusion has to come when there is a deeply felt connection at your core with what it is that you're offering, what it is that you're communicating. And we see it so vividly from you, Candace, so many of these comments that people are sharing in terms of what they're, experiencing from you right now really speaks to that. I just want to share some of these so that we can celebrate and, appreciate what perspectives we're getting from the audience. So Pooja is saying that, what she's drawing out from your work so far is, how one can be making a difference to ensure that no one else suffers the way, you have suffered. Amit is talking about this incredibly strong belief you have in your cause. And here's another one. It's this vision, to do something really noble for society. I know you talk about vision as well as a critical attribute of activism. We should come back and talk about that. Here's another one which talks about your resolve and determination, the opportunity to turn tragedy into real strength. Myra is again, talking about the strength, the persistence, the tenacity, that you're communicating. This notion of just one step leading to another. Elaine is saying, another woman who's created an international, who's teaching from one step to the next, right? I love this idea, the step-by-step approach. Your passion to change attitudes, passion has obviously helped you achieve your goals, says Harsaran. I can just go on and on. There's just so many, just wonderful kind of observations here. Amit is talking about how exactly what you just said, speaking from the heart, so beautifully. Let's talk about the here and now. So you've so far showed us the story that got you to conceive MAD, to launch MAD, to engage in that sort of journey towards, social reform and change, which, by the way, I have to mention to you that while it was focused on the United States of America, over the years, those values of traffic safety and discipline have gradually percolated through other parts of the world, of course, through well-founded initiatives in those parts of the world as well. But so much of that has been your energy and influence, that was starting from there. I can certainly feel that, for example, when I travel to and I'm experiencing India, the last several years, where this has also been a big menace, drunk driving. Even now, is not something that is completely purged. And yet I see a certain awakening of consciousness that is happening with the way that we're, crossbreeding, strengths from across different cultures. America is borrowing a little bit from different parts of the world, and India is borrowing a little bit from America, etc. But this is one force that you've unleashed that is gradually taking over the whole planet, which is beautiful. So let's talk about sort of what has been happening since, because you at some point decided to move on beyond MAT, and you've started another organization. What is this new organization that you started?
We Save Lives. And I started We Save Lives because I was very involved at that time with two different companies at two different times who were dealing with the drug driving issue and had developed products that would help take drug drivers off the road. And I actually became very passionate in working with them about the problem of drug driving. And ironically, my son, when he was 4, was run over by a woman on Valium and critically injured, was in a coma. So I had already a personal connection to it, but I didn't realize the problem was as prevalent. And even though at MAD we had drug driving in our mission statement, you just didn't hear about it as much because they didn't have the right kind of testing. And they had testing, but it wasn't what they have now. So I started mixing and mingling with different traffic safety groups, etc. And so there was actually two things going on here. One was getting passionate about the issue of drug driving. I also became very passionate about distracted driving because I was mentoring a young woman at the time, JC Good, whose family was, her parents were killed and she was permanently injured by a distracted driver. And since then, my back is broken because of a distracted driver. You can understand why I no longer drive. Anyway, so I started thinking, wow, somebody needs to do something about drug driving and distracted driving because there weren't a lot of groups at that time doing anything. I also saw a need for the traffic safety community, the highway safety community, to come together and work together because I didn't think they were. And so I started We Save Lives as a partner organization, a coalition, so to speak, of other organizations who share similar goals and similar visions so that we could share what each other was doing, promote what each other was doing, etc. And also to deal with drugged and distracted driving. And because of who I am, I obviously, would continue dealing with drunk driving. But to be honest with you, it was drugged and distracted that really got me going on this.
Yeah. Can I show that beautiful message that you created at We Save Lives around this topic? And as I do that, I want to just kind of highlight to everybody the magic of having Candace in my classroom. So here she is, surrounded by these MBAs, right, who are out there to kind of figure out how to make it big, succeed beyond the success they've already had coming into Columbia. And here they are, in the presence of this world changer. And you could easily be resting on your laurels, looking back at all the success, the 400,000 lives that you have been credited to saving over the years. But you're not done. You're not done. That part is incredible. The way you interact with that group and use every moment and every opportunity to get that same message across, to invite each of them to make a commitment, to do their soul searching, and you give them some practical tips about what to do and how to do. So let's watch this video, and then I just want to come back and invite you to give a couple of those tips and guidance to our community here as well, because what's powerful there to me is that you're never done with your purpose. You found that you're awake, you're infused with the desire to help, whether it's one individual or a billion. And that is pure magic, Candace. All right, let's show this video.
What's up, man?
Tonight, we have new information on the 26-year-old driver who crashed into a St. Johns County deputy, killing him.
Chris Cadilla of Jacksonville was driving the wrong way on 9A and slammed into a St. Johns County Sheriff's deputy's car.
My name is Chris Cadillo. I'm 32 years old. I'm in prison for DUI manslaughter, and I'm sentenced to 15 years. I think about the man that I killed in the crash all the time. I kind of try to replay the scene in my head and see where things went wrong. But mostly I just think about him and his family. I hope that I'll reach out to somebody and stop people from drinking and driving, thinking twice about the next time they want to get in the car. How's it going?
Doing good.
Are you having a good time?
Yeah. Well, what do you have? How'd you get in the mirror?
I don't know if you can tell right now, but I'm talking to you from prison.
You're in prison. Is this a joke?
No, I wish it was. Definitely not. What are you drinking?
I don't know. Whiskey sour.
It's a good drink.
Yeah.
One night, I was drinking out with friends. I got in the car, drove, and killed somebody.
Sucks. I'm sorry to hear that.
The man I killed was a police officer. He had 4 children, a wife, and I took him away from him. I made the choice to drink. I made the choice to get in the car. You don't have to make that choice. So take a good look in the mirror, man. Should you be driving tonight?
Man, I mean, that's kind of serious. I have a friend that's DDing tonight. I was going to take a taxi, actually, so.
Good for you, man. Just make sure your friends get home safely, too.
Definitely will. I get it. Thanks.
Be safe out there.
I will. All right, thanks, man. Thank you.
To someone who thinks that this would never happen to them, I'd say think twice about it. Because I was in that same boat. I thought I was invincible. It eventually caught up to me.
I still get chills when I watch that.
I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say literally the same thing.
Let me just tell you, wait a minute, I have to tell you, this video has gone around the world. It has been shown hundreds of millions of times. It has been transcribed into languages I've never even heard of. That's how impactful it is.
Yeah, wow. It deserves to be. I mean, it is, like you said, it gives you, goosebumps. Pam O'Donnell was saying, I wish every bar and restaurant could play this in the bathrooms. Mr. Seri is saying, all I can say is thank you, Candace, for making the world safer for us and our kids. I mean, just think about it. For those of us who are parents, who knows how many of us may not have had a child around today if it wasn't for the safer world that Candace's loss allowed us to, ultimately make, right? The safer world. Candace, there are a couple of questions that I think will allow us to maybe pivot to the last part of the conversation we should have, which is Angela, for example, is asking, what's next for you, Candace? And then here's another, comment about, you have a very captivating way to tell your story. It's inspiring, it's heartbreaking, and it leaves me with hope. Do you think that, this is something that you could teach people to do? And so, I just thought, like, if I combine those two questions, this might be a beautiful moment for us to hear from you. This new project that you've taken on to create a masterclass, an online masterclass. What is that class about?
It's about learning how to be a successful activist and run a successful campaign, really. It's about the qualities that it takes to be an activist. What is it that you need to do? What is it that you can do? And then how to do it. I'm really good on strategy and how-tos. I get very frustrated today, and Hitendra and I have talked about this personally, about some of the movements that I don't see moving And I think they could be so much more successful if they would just implement certain measures. And so in my frustration, and I hate being an armchair activist, I decided that, don't just be frustrated and don't just complain to all your friends, do something about it. So I'm working on this course that I hope everybody can use to some degree, whether they want to start a movement again or just make a difference in their community, that will share with them positive, meaningful ways on how they can do this. There's one little thing I want to throw in here when people were talking about the passion, and it's true, I am very passionate. I was a passionate back in Mad Days, and I'm still a pretty passionate person. But there's something else that people need, and that's logic. And I found that to be absolutely invaluable when you're discussing something. And so part of this course is going to teach people how to logically disarm your opponent and how to do it with not just passion and the feeling of righteousness, but also with logic and reason. So that's what I'm embarking on now.
It is beautiful. I'm so excited. I'm honored that we have a chance to collaborate on doing this project, Candace. What are the qualities that you think many people may miss when, in a well-intentioned way, they want to sort of like find a way to change the world in a certain way? They have a certain value, they have a certain desire, a hunger. They try to go out and fix the world to kind of be aligned with it, but they struggle, they fail, they retreat. What are one or two, kinds of pitfalls or shortcomings in perhaps the way they've approached it or the way they've thought about it? Because over the years, in addition to, proceeding fiercely on your own purpose, you have been consulted, right, by a lot of people who wanted to start their own movements on their own cause.
I can't tell you how many people have contacted me over the years. Almost every week, I hear from someone who has suffered some kind of an injustice personally, or has seen some kind of an injustice, within their family or their schools or whatever, and want to right the wrongs. And that's what prompted, that's another reason, because I can't deal with all of them individually. And I thought this course probably could help them very much in learning how to deal with that. I think, this isn't where you were at, Hitendra, I think, with this question, but I want to talk about it for a second. And that's protests. So, and as you saw, we, had pickets in the state capitol, and we had pickets. This is a real issue for me right now, and pickets at the White House. And I watch protesters, and I don't, I may not agree with their reasons for protesting in certain cases, but they have every right to protest. I'm actually getting ready to do a blog about it. And the problem that I see today is that people, when they disagree, they don't know how to disagree in a way that the public can look at and say, I may not agree with how they believe this country should operate or the environment should operate, but I can see their point after they've done this protest. Instead, they alienate people. Their arrests, their, whatever it is, gun carrying, whatever, ends up alienating people. And it's not making the point that I think they need to make. And I respect their right to make that point, whether we agree or disagree. So I see a lot of this. And like we've talked about earlier at other times, I've seen movements that aren't moving in the direction that I think would be helpful to all of us. I'm such a firm believer in people making a difference because it makes my life easier and safer. When you have groups that go forward and fight, rape on college campuses, these are all, some of these groups have contacted me, and they succeed, by making a difference or getting more security or whatever, it helps my child or grandchild who may go to college. So I'm just a real believer in activists and activism. But I'm also a real believer in doing it in the best way possible that makes the best difference possible.
Yeah, I love that sort of purity of intention with the practicality of doing it just the right way, right? And borrowing from all the best practices that are out there about how to influence, the world and how to win, stakeholder support, but doing it for the right causes, the right reasons, all that, right? And that's such a beautiful outer intersection that you represent, Candace, which is at the heart of this this conversation that we have here in Intersections. It's beautiful. there are a couple of you who are asking, where can you get more information about this course? For now, the easiest thing that I can say is, Anobik, I'm going to ask my colleague to put into the chat window a place where you can sign up for my newsletter if that's not something you're already getting, because we will certainly actively announce when that course is actually ready for enrollment. It's going to happen very soon, and so we will announce that.
Hang on, Hitendra. Also, then go to my website, Candace at CandaceLightner.com, and just sign up there, just so we have their names. And I didn't.
So let me just kind of put that down for people. Is it just Candace at CandaceLightner.com?
Lightner.com.
Right.
And
sorry,
they can sign up there.
For these inquiries, but let me just throw that into the chat window as well, so people have it. Thank you, Candace.
So are you going to make it clear that we're collaborating on this? I didn't know if you wanted me to do that, or are you going to, is that?
And it's an honor. Why would
I'm doing this on a webinar in front of everybody, but
Yeah, no, it's look, I mean, I'm here to support you. I'm here to support you in any which way the team at Mentora and I can, for such a noble cause. And over the years as we've known each other, that there has been a very heartfelt commingling of just values and interests and energy. And I've just felt so honored and grateful, to be in your presence and to live through your, stories, that path that humanity took, in getting to advance its consciousness through you. So to be in a position to support you, to provide whatever educational, arsenal I can, from my side with the work that we've done on helping people arrive at their full potential, life and leadership, to bring our technology and tools, and, any or all of that, right? I ultimately see that to be in service of the cause that you've taken on for years. I've just shown up in recent times to kind of applaud you, for this work. So yeah, absolutely, it'll be a great honor for me to support you in that, Candace. And I also feel a great sense of commitment, to this as a priority. Certainly, it has been for you, but really, I see that today for educators, and to that end for me, because we're at a point in time where the old, in a sense, world is getting dismantled, and a new world is starting to take shape, but it's very confusing right now, and it's probably going to take a while before it finally gets there. And along the way, we have the opportunity to shed certain old habits, maybe even sort of eliminate or dissolve certain old institutions and create certain new ones, strengthen and reaffirm the core, but do it in the advancement of humanity. So I can't think of a more critical hour for humanity to invest in that journey that you're going to help them create, in understanding how to sustainably succeed.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Thank you.
Candace, any final thoughts and words from you as we bring this conversation to closure?
This is my first webinar, so actually it is, yes, stay safe. Please practice common sense. Please look at, since we're in COVID-19 here, please look at what the doctors say. I want you safe because I love all of you. And please drive safe. Please stay safe. Please do whatever you can to keep yourself and your family safe.
Thank you, Candace. There's a beautiful comment that I use to close out our audience's, heartfelt reaction towards you. And so Pam says, Candace is a wealth of information. She's my mentor. So honored to have been with her last year at Columbia. I hope that we can do it again. So there you go. Yeah. Thank you so much, Candace. Looking forward to having you back, both on this show and, of course, in helping you launch that masterclass. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So for all of us here, let's close it out in the next couple of minutes. What I want to do in just these last couple of minutes is, give you a couple of takeaways that I'm taking away from this conversation with Candace. I would love, as I'm doing this, for you to use the chat window to share a couple of your takeaways as well. What is the one big thing that you're taking away, the one big thing that you are seeking to commit to? Share this webcast, if you can, in your social media platform so others can also come back and experience this recorded version of this webcast with Candace Lightner. Also, if you can, join our follow-up conversations in my various social media channels. I'm going to ask my colleague to again put them up in the chat window. And as we're doing that, let me again just bring this to closure with a couple of these thoughts about what I'm taking away from today's conversation. 3 things. The first is that notice that something really earth-shattering and painful happened to Candace, and that she could not change. And there are times in life when we feel, I can't change this. This has happened to me. It's such a gross injustice. It's such a loss. It is so irreversible. Wasn't all of that happening to Candace? And yet, she decided that, look, there is a path I can take in life where I just keep going down this path of grieving and loss and pain. And then there is this other path I can take. And that other path is where, yes, there will be that grieving and loss and pain. Nobody can bring my daughter back. But along with that grieving and loss and pain, there will be a sense of something, a sense of reward, fulfillment, resolution that I might feel, knowing that through my loss, I went down a path where I helped support the reform of society, the advancement of the world, so that today there are many other mothers who have their daughters with them that I didn't get a chance to keep with me because of the loss that I went through. And to that end, she seized the pen, of her life and started to re-author her life story. So we are the authors of our own life story. Then did you notice that she came from this, relatively, if you want to call it humble or just, a very sort of unrelated professional background of being in the real estate business. And here she is going into influence legislators, making her way all the way to the White House with President Reagan, creating social change, having so much impact, speaking from the heart, inspiring masses up until even today, right? We can achieve things way beyond what we may have imagined if we unshackle ourselves from the constraints of this is my role, this is my resume, this is what I'm meant to do in that very narrowly defined channel. And what a critical hour for us to actually open ourselves up to that kind of an unshackling of our identity. Because with everything going on in the world today, is it not the case that many of us are or will soon be thrust into roles and responsibilities that we have to go way beyond, in a sense, what we may feel like we were qualified to do based on our schooling or our professional experiences or our sense of identity and what have you. And then the third learning, we can, in fact, transform humanity. This idea that, when you look around the world and there is a sense of, let's say, pain you feel, or frustration or disappointment about how this person just doesn't get it, this institution doesn't get it, this nation doesn't get it, this culture doesn't get it, humanity doesn't get it, etc. Whatever it might be for you, as it was with regard to safe driving for Candace, whatever it might be for you, notice that one person can make a difference. Notice that over time, if you're patient and you sow the seeds, transformation can happen. And all of humanity can rise to a place where today, people in some ways are rolling their eyes and saying, what, really? There was an era where everybody was driving drunk and the stand-up comics on television were used to joke about it and people were so complacent about it, because today people are just so much more sensitive and so much more thoughtful, even though there's more work to be done around drug driving and distracted driving and even drunk driving. But so much has been changed. And so we can, in fact, transform humanity. That is, in fact, what the history of civilization shows us, that through the unsung and more visible heroes, around the world, gradually society has woken up to higher states of consciousness. Now, let me invite you to take one action as a commitment from this conversation we've had today. And that one action is, what is one cause? What is one something as a value that you feel deeply, deeply, deeply drawn to, wanting to manifest and express in the world, because you truly believe it's going to be in the service of humanity? And take that one thing and ask yourself, what is one thing that I can start doing from tomorrow as my first step or my next step beyond the steps I'm taking? My first step or my next step. What is one thing that I can do to put that value into action? And then who knows what the multiplicative long-term rewards of that might be. On that note, my friends, let me close with a preview with you of the conversation we're going to have next time. So next Thursday, 11 a.m. East Coast time, we will have with us a storied name in the field of psychology, Scott Barry Kaufman. Scott also happens to be my colleague in teaching at Columbia. He teaches classes on powerful, beautiful ideas like well-being in life, intelligence, and creativity. He is a highly prolific writer in the Scientific American magazine. He has written 9 books. He has just launched his most recent book called Transcend, the New Science of Self-Actualization. And here is another very preeminent author, researcher, writer, Adam Grant, speaking very, very praisingly about Scott Kaufman and his work around transcendence. We're going to talk about this quality, this hunger in each of us to want to approach our full potential, to flourish in life and in work. And Scott has a chock full of ideas in this book about how we can actually take some of the latest science of psychology and use it to better our own selves. Join me for an enriching discussion with Scott Barry Kaufman on Transcend, this reimagining this idea of self-actualization for the 21st century. All right, thank you, my friends. On that note, I'll invite you to go back into your beautiful lives and make some powerful meaning happen in the next week and beyond as you take this one value that you deeply believe in and, inspired by Candace, take some one step to more actively expressing it in the world. Thank you. Namaste.